Hey, this is Ben London, and you're listening to the Couch Riffs podcast.
You might be watching.
I might be watching. Oh, okay.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Squires, and this is the Couchress Podcast, episode number 276. And my guest for the next hour or so is Ben London. Ben London, I've been known for a long time, since the 1900s. And when I met him, I believe his band Alcohol Funnycar had already disbanded, and he was working at the EMP Museum, which is now, it was the Jimi Hendrix Museum, more or less. He now plays guitar in a band called STAG with a bunch of my other good buddies, who used to rehearse in this very room. And he is the executive director of an organization called Sonic Guild. Now, when I first got back to Seattle last year, I did some production work for a show for Sonic Guild, and it was awesome. I guess I kind of knew what they were up to, but seeing it in action and seeing them hand checks to people during the show and the ceremony there was incredible. I hope that you will pay attention and listen to this podcast and see what they're up to, and consider becoming a member if you're able, or supporting however you can, or maybe it just inspires you to support some local musicians or some touring musicians, just independent musicians or musicians in general, even folks who have record deals or publishing deals. A lot of those deals are not great deals. Folks get themselves into a lot of situations based on necessity. And they're still left with a lot of needs that aren't met by all the hard work that they're doing. So, Sonic Guild is up to a lot of great stuff. I hope that you enjoy this conversation. I had a great time talking with Ben. I had a great time learning more about what Sonic Guild is doing to help perpetuate more new music coming your way, and creating a situation where people can, live and be artists. So thank you for listening. Thank you for considering supporting Sonic Guild. If you're enjoying Couch Riffs and you feel inspired to support this, I also would love that. I'm a touring musician, and I understand very well not having all of my needs met. So you can support Couch Riffs at patreon.com/couchriffs. You can also make one-time donations and support right in YouTube. There's a little button underneath every video that says, I don't know, some sort of support button. I should know that better. I really should get that pitch down. Good golly. Sorry, I just got home from tour last night, so I'm still a little loopy. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I love doing this. I flew home from tour a day early so that I could be here to do this intro so I can get this released. I edited this video in a tour van, and as soon as I turn record off, I'm starting recording an episode that'll be released later this month. So thank you for watching and listening, and don't forget the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated, and don't be a dick.
Hey, this is Ben London. You are watching and perhaps listening to the Couch Riffs podcast.
Beautiful.
All right.
What a start. Ben, welcome to the Couches Podcast.
I thank you for having me. It's been I've been listening for years, so what a pleasure to be the one sitting on the couch now.
And we're studio neighbors. This very room used to be your practice space.
It is true. You probably had to burn a lot of sage to get the bad musical juju out of this space. So
Does it even resemble that room any longer?
No, it just is an illustration of what somebody that actually cares about stuff can do with a space, as to about us, where it was just like, why would we ever lift anything, any finger to anything to make it nice?
One of my great specialties is caring about like the island of misfit toys.
I appreciate that. You're like the Santa Claus of the Island of Misfit Toys, you know?
Was Santa the what did he do with the island? He didn't
Well,
do
didn't
anything. Like it
Santa
was.
swing by every year and pick some up?
Did he?
Or actually, you know,
No,
if
he
we dig a little,
cast.
if we dig a little deeper, I think that they were exiled there.
That's what I
And it was
think.
only once they acknowledged that Rudolph was cool and could do something for them to help them keep their business in order. Then they were like, "Oh, maybe these misfit toys. Maybe we can sell those for like half off." The remnant. They were going to call it Remnant Island, but it sounded better.
Send him off to Big Lots.
I wonder generationally, like, I feel like being Gen X or whatever, that the island of misfit toys is something that we bring up all the time to talk about, whether it's casting ourselves like, hey, we're all this like on the island of misfit toys or
Right.
stuff like that. And I wonder if younger people are like, A, like, what are you talking about? B, why would you celebrate that or something? Or D, why are you so old and why are you standing close to me?
But you're a parent. Like, do they still play those stop motion claymation things?
I think they do. And yeah, my kids have seen them, but I don't know if they see them because I just was
But
nostalgic
your
for it.
kids are adults
They're
now.
no, yeah, pretty much, pretty much. They may not always act like it, but pretty close. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, all that Bass Rankin stuff. I mean, that's so much part of our DNA from growing up of
Right.
watching that stuff, and I mean, that's the weird thing about the world today is that like everybody can watch exactly what they want all the time. So the average person hasn't seen the Rankin Bass. I'm not even thinking about Rudolph, but like Jack Frost or one of those other ones hasn't
Right.
seen it like 16 times because it's just all that was
Frosty the
on. Frosty the
Snowman.
Snowman, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Or that you've seen every episode of the Brady Bunch like 16
Like some
times
of
or
these
a gazillion
kids
times.
think that Heat Miser is just a cool band for their 90 revivalist
Yeah,
hipsterism.
that if they think that, I have hope. It's like.
Heat
They
Miser is
probably know
so
who
much
Elliott Smith
more.
is. They probably don't know who Heat Miser is, but
Right.
they were a
Kids.
great band. We used to play shows with them back in the day.
I'm glad that you brought that up. So before we start talking about the upcoming event,
Yeah,
I want to give a little bit of context
sure.
to just so that like people who don't know you or don't know you outside of Sonic Guild
Right.
don't think that you're just some tosser. Like you're a person who's put in years and you're a solid music veteran.
Well, two things can be true at the same time. So I could have done all that and be a tosser simultaneously. Yeah, I mean, I've been an active part of this music community here in Seattle for 30 plus years now, probably like closer to 35 or something. It's kind of crazy, but played in bands, and I jokingly refer to myself as a footnote of flannel, and that I did the same thing that many of the other artists in the 90s did, got signed, made records, went on tour, just didn't sell millions of records. So,
Right.
the whole all of the 90s is kind of boiled down to four artists now in most people's eyes. Even Mudhoney doesn't get included in the big four, which is kind of crazy.
Right.
But yeah, I got to do a bunch of stuff, and it was a pretty wild. We won the rock and roll lottery when we moved to Seattle in 1989. Who knew it was going to be the? We sure didn't move here because we thought it was going to be the epicenter of music. When I moved out here from Ohio in 1989.
You just knew it was cooler than Ohio.
Knew it was cooler than Ohio. I came through Seattle summer of '88. I was touring America with a play, doing the music, and we came to Seattle, and we came in August, which is like, you're like, why doesn't the entire world live in Seattle if you come through in August?
Right.
And then Steve Moriarty, who was my college roommate and was the drummer in the Gits, he came through that same summer with this like mobile classroom thing that our college did. So collectively, when our couple of bands, the Gits, I was in a band called Big Brown House that shared a couple members of the Gits. Valerie, who ended up forming 7 Year Bitch, was part of our college group as well, and a couple other folks. And we were trying to talk about like, hey, we've been doing bands in college for 4 years. Let's find some place to move and try to like be musicians or whatever. And some people that were from New York, I was from Ohio. So we talked about like New York's so expensive. LA at that point was all hair metal. Why would
I
anybody
love
move
how
to?
already New York is so expensive.
Yeah, well, totally. Chicago felt too close, and that like the Gits guys, Andy and Matt and Mia, they had spent a summer or something at a place called the Farm in San Francisco, which was like a punk rock venue
Hmm.
and stuff, and an active farm. And even that, they kind of felt like San Francisco's kind of expensive. Maybe we'd try this. And the only thing we really knew about Seattle, other than the weather was beautiful in August, was as a college DJ, I had heard the first Soundgarden record on SST. Like I had spun that, and I think we had heard Skin Yard because they had like tried to book a show at our college or something.
Hmm.
And literally at that point, we were like, well, if a band can live in Seattle and be on SST, that was as big as the dream was back then. That would have been like making it. Like there was no thought of like we're gonna get signed to Warner Brothers and be
Right.
giant or blah blah blah. And then yeah, we got out here and the scene was so small at that point. Like the only like for the kind of music we were doing, like the Vogue was one of a few venues that did music, and they only did like punk rock on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, or like punk rock grunge, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the early sub pop bands were playing, and we'd start going to shows there. And after like 2 or 3 weeks, people came up and started introducing themselves to us, like, "Hey, are you guys new in town?" Because there was like a disturbance in the force or something. Like,
Right.
who is this group of people that we've never seen before, and why are they here? And it
The
was
influx had not yet
not
begun.
at all. Not at all. And it was amazing. And so like, Mia from the Gits, she got a job working at the counter at the Frontier Room, which was a block and a half down from the Vogue. And so back then you couldn't have hard liquor without food. And so you could only have beer at wine at the rock venue. So people would just kind of go back and forth between sets, run over to the Frontier Room, have shots, drink there, run back and forth. And, she got to meet like John Poneman from Sub Pop early on, met her and saw her band, and then like invited them to open up for Nirvana at the Hub Ballroom early on.
Right.
A show that I'm ashamed to say that I did not stick around for Nirvana that night because I was jealous that the Gits were getting to play that show, and I got too drunk. And my girlfriend, now wife at the time, was like, "You're going home. We are going home." And so I got to see Tad, which
That's
was
rad.
awesome. And
Yeah.
they were shooting a live footage for the Wood Goblins video that night. But and I saw was backstage with those guys. But yeah, I mean it all seems pretty quaint now, but at the time
You
it was
did see
just like,
Nirvana back then.
hmm yeah.
Did Alcohol Funnycar open for them ever?
No, we never no, because really if you think about it, by the time we got here in '89, like August '89, going into 1990, like Soundgarden was out on the road a bunch at that point. Nirvana was touring more
Right.
at that point. We got there for the tail end of Love Bone. Like I saw them once at the Vogue, but then and I actually went to a gym for a while that Andy was at, but then he passed away, and we weren't really tight with those folks because if you really think about the core of the Seattle scene, it's people that either went to high school together,
Right.
went to the UW, or literally there was like 100 people in a room, the Ditto Tavern or a few other places like that, that either you were on the stage or you were in the audience for a couple of years there, and a bunch of those bands rose out of that. And so we were just a little bit later than that, but before a lot of the other
You were
stuff.
like second wave.
So we were much more, our peers were more like, um let me see, like the Derelicts, Hammerbox, Gas Huffer, trying to think who else. Yeah, more like second wave bands, and I'm gonna get my chronology wrong, but there was like Empty Records bands, like kind of like
Yeah.
stuff that leaned a little more punk. And I'll be completely honest, where we were coming from when we first got out here, some of the grunge stuff just felt a little too metal. Like it felt like, what are they doing exactly? Because we were maybe more punk aligned or something like that.
Sure.
And it's funny to think now, but that's what it kind of felt like. And because it was so insular in some ways, there was this, you know, you, uh, you always want to tear down what's happening, right? So it'd be like, fuck those guys, we're doing our thing, man, blah blah blah, and
You came here and you were an outsider.
exactly. Oh, Super Suckers, another band of the,
Right.
it's just like all these kind of end of first generation, second generation bands, and in some ways, I'm more of like a second and a half generation band because the band I was in that shared members with the Gits, um, I could tell. I mean, and surely the Gits was going to be their focus. And at a certain point, I was like, I don't want to be in this band anymore. I'm going to go form my own band and be the singer instead of just the guitar player.
Right.
And so I formed Alcohol Funnycar, and so we didn't actually actively get going probably until '91, something like that. And then got signed by 93 or something like,
Yeah.
something like that and whatnot. And
So this I would consider to be the golden era of, or the, maybe not the golden era of Seattle music, but the peak of excitement around the Seattle music scene. The four big bands had blown up.
yeah.
It was going nuts, and people were moving here like crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So we predated that a little bit, but that definitely happened. And it was wild, man. I mean,
But
I
you were
think,
here through all of that.
yeah, for sure. And I think, some of the people that grew up here, and depending on what band you were in, some people, they were really turned off by the whole thing. But maybe because we were a little more outsider,
Right.
or I was a little bit younger, or whatever that might be, I thought it was all really exciting, in
Right.
a lot of ways. And I was like, why would you not want people to like your band, or things like that? And it was really wild. Like at a certain point, like, so another place that we met tons of people in Seattle was the Comet Tavern. There was like one bar on Capitol Hill that was kind of like the living room, and you'd hang out with your friends. You'd see your friends be like, "Hey, you're doing the show next week. You want to play with our?" There was a lot of like stuff like that going on, and the scene was so small. Again, at one point, like Linda's, there was a bar that opened called Linda's Tavern that I think
Mm-hmm.
the Sub Pop guys ended up being financiers in some way, and there was all this discussion like, can Capitol Hill support two bars?
Which
Is
is
there enough people to
preposterous to think
support
of
two bars?
now.
Right, right. And similarly, like music venues, like the Crocodile opened at one point. Like some people decided we're going to open the Crocodile because like Skid Row, but anyway, so like, and then like around that same period, the snowball started picking up size going down the hill. You got some bigger venues and then more venues. Numos happened on Capitol Hill and more bands are playing the Color Box, like, and then it just culturally
Do you
became
mean that Mo
Moe's.
Rockin'
Sorry, yeah,
Cafe
yeah,
opened
yeah,
up?
yeah. That I actually worked off the books, hanging sound insulation, doing construction on that when they were opening it.
I got 86th from that place the first month it opened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember being in there before it opened, and I remember being there the last night it was open when they were emptying, when I still drank, when they were emptying the bar out, and everybody was like, "What do you got left? Cream to mint? Give it to me!" Like,
I was insignificant enough that no one ever remembered that I was never to
right.
enter the place again.
But it was
I went back many times.
I mean, what was cool about that period is just there was a zeitgeist, like culturally, about live music, underground music, or whatever. But so the way people talk about pickleball now is
Right.
the way people were talking about grunge music, right? So people would go out on just like a Wednesday night just to see bands. They weren't like, I have to go see this band or that band. So sometimes, like, I remember we did a show at Rock Candy once, which was another venue, and we put it up, and like we show up on a Thursday night with some bands that were, kind of known but not really known, and there was like a line around the block for people to get into it, and you're like, why? How is this even happening? This is pre-internet, pre anything, and it just was, because that's what young people did. um and then, like many things, it oversaturated and then kind of withered and had to go underground until kind of the next generation poked its head up and started doing what they did. And we've been lucky enough in Seattle that it seems like every couple of years some band or some kind of new voices elevate and
Right.
have something happen.
You've had a number of music industry jobs, career positions. Have you always had a position in the arts, like even back then?
No, I mean, when I first got here, I joke, like I have a Stag song where, the band I'm in now, where there's a line that's like, degree in philosophy, graduated to mowing lawns. I mean, that's basically based on, like, I got a art degree and then I moved to Seattle and I made pizza for a year. I mean, so I wouldn't do that. What I think, in hindsight, the industry stuff kind of always interested me. And so when we were lucky enough to get a lot of opportunities as a band, met with a lot of labels, went through that whole machinery, and I always asked a lot of questions about stuff and was really interested in that. And so as my band was kind of plateauing and the realization was setting in that it wasn't going to go giant for us, or that we didn't have the wherewithal to keep pushing for another 3 years hoping something like that would happen, I started getting more interested in that kind of stuff. And so when we stopped doing Alcohol Funnycar, I got a job working for a tiny little indie label that somebody had, like a bedroom label somebody had here. And
Was
then
it CZ?
No, it was called Echo Static. It was this
Okay.
woman, Janet Redgway, started it and put out some cool 7 inches and whatnot. And then around that time, I heard the inklings of uh, that Paul Allen was going to open a Jimi Hendrix museum. A friend of a friend met somebody at a party. I mean, again, small town.
Right.
And I was like, I'm a musician. I have an art degree. I should work there. And managed to get my foot in the door. And that was like really what professionalized me into music. I started as like an intern and was there for 7.5 years and left with a senior position. And
You started there as an intern.
yeah,
Whoa.
it was like a gamble. Wanted, I was like, I need to work here. I don't know what.
Were you 30?
No, I was 27, maybe
Right.
20. It possessed me, but I went and met them. You know, kind of. I met somebody that met somebody there. Talked my way into going out there and talking to the people in the office, and they were like, "We don't have any jobs. You seem cool or whatever." And I was like, "Can you intern here?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can I intern full time?" They were like, "Well, nobody's ever done that, but I guess so." And I was like, "Okay." And so I did that, and I got hired 6 weeks later.
What a great investment of your time.
Yeah, I mean, and lucky, I had the privilege of that. I had a little bit of money saved, and you know, I've my Roseanne, who's my wife now, whatever. So it was like I wasn't worried about like I'm going to be homeless if I don't work.
Right.
I mean, I couldn't have done it for 6 months
Right.
or even 3 months, but it just felt like, and
And you get to do a lot of cool things
I
in
call
that
it my grad school
organization.
experience. I got to do so much shit. It was kind of insane. I meet so many of my heroes, and
Right.
I was involved with a lot of the artifact acquisition and the museum exhibit development. Did tons of oral histories with artists, kind of like what we're doing here, but for sitting down with like DMC from Run DMC or a bunch of
Right.
famous skateboarders, or any number of kind of stuff we were doing. And as through that, one of the things that I brought to the table there, which is one of the reasons I think they hired me as well, is that I had a pretty good Rolodex of music industry people that they
Right.
didn't have from my life as a musician, but was could be domesticized. I could be the musician that could still show up at 9 a.m. and be to work on time.
Sure.
So I wasn't shooting junk under the desk
Which is,
or something like that. So
there's still time for you.
I am hoping. I'm hoping. I heard it's fun. Why, you got some? Is that
I
is
think
this
it's great at first.
what's the opposite of an intervention? Is that what this is?
An
Yeah,
outervention.
tie me off, man. Um,
It was in
Totally.
full swing by 2000, right?
Yeah,
It was
totally.
like,
So, I mean, I was lucky enough to work for EMP, that's known as Mopop now, for 7.5 years or something. And right after, a year or two after 9/11, the whole world changed because of tourism and stuff like that. And so I actually got laid off from there, but was lucky enough to get recruited for a job with the Grammys. And so they have regional offices around the country. And so I ran the regional office here in the Northwest in Hawaii for about another 6 years or something like that. And you get to a certain age, you've had a lot of jobs. And then I went and did like music and media business development for Hewlett Packard for about 4 years, and then was part of a marketing agency for a while. But all that took me to what I'm doing now, where after I sold my part of this agency I was a part of, really wanted to get back to more of like a mission-based environment. And I've been really active, involved with like politics and music and things, and supporting artists in our community throughout all of this stuff,
right.
and just felt this real sense of urgency about the massive transformation Seattle had been going through, and seeing so many of like friends and creatives and musicians and all these people that were leaving. Everybody was moving to Portland, everybody was going here, everybody was going there, and it was like, I can't afford to live here. And then I was like, what is this city if it doesn't have cool shit going on in it? And I mean, and I'm not trying to tear down technology, whatever. That's cool shit too. But
Sure.
if this was just all musicians, that would get boring too. Like, I like going to South by Southwest, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Right.
I mean, at the conference, nothing against Austin. So, yeah. So I heard about Sonic Guild through a couple different people, that they had started, that this nonprofit had started in Austin in 2013, and it seemed like they had solved they'd cracked the code a little bit on some of the issues that musicians were facing. Because oftentimes when we were doing work trying to support the music community here, whether it was through the Seattle Music Commission or other stuff, we'd be like, we're going to do this education program, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then it'd be like, but musicians, how are they going to get the money to do any of these things we're advising them to do? And historically, when musicians get access to money or to capital, it's been having to sign away portions of their future earning power away. And so with Sonic Guild, And let me just first say, Sonic Guild is not a perfect model. It is not the solution for all that ails the music community or musicians or anything.
Right.
It's just one thing that we're trying, an iterative approach and trying to do that. And was that they created this kind of patronage model where music fans pay a yearly fee, then in exchange they get to come to private shows highlighting kind of emerging talent. They're not buying the Golden Circle tickets for the Rolling Stones when they come to town. I mean, although they could still do that, but
Sure.
it's a way, people get a little older, they get separated from through family or work. They're not going out 5 nights a week or whatever. So it's a way of curating music and letting them experience that. And then the dollars that they pay along is a catalyst for other fundraising we do. But then that creates a grant pool that we give out in unrestricted grants every year. And so we've grown that now that this year we have an event on February 22nd at the Triple Door, and we're distributing $100,000 in grants to 10 artists. So each one of those artists or bands will get $10,000 that they can put towards their music careers as they see fit. So that could be making a record, that could be going on tour, that could be hiring professional services, or it could be paying their rent or their phone bill. I mean, those are all things you have to do to try to be a
To
musician
survive as a, yeah.
or to just try and live, right? We all
Right.
have to face that, so with this year, this is our 5th year of giving. We're just in the grants portion of what we do, we're coming up just shy of $400,000 we will have distributed to musicians, to 51 artists in this first 5 years. So
That's
um
amazing.
and then in addition to that, we're trying to figure out what other ways we can alleviate some of the pressure of different stress points that musicians are facing. So this last year we got some funding from a partner in Tito's Vodka. One of their employees put us forward for what they're called their passion projects program, where it's employee based giving. And so we got a grant from them for about $50,000 that's going to fund a tour support grant program that's application based for musicians. So if you're going on the road, you can apply for support, and an artist could get up to $150 a show for up to 10 shows. And again, just trying to take that edge off of gas, lodging, food,
Sure.
and particularly for when I toured America, probably when you toured and different stuff like that, you never felt unsafe going and sleeping on somebody's floor
Right.
or things like that. And so particularly for women, for people of color, for trans folks, I mean, any of those sort of folks that, you know, everybody's got to work super hard in music, and a lot of things have to go right, but at least it feels like the starting line should be the same place for everybody, that some people shouldn't have to be starting 50 feet behind everybody else. So
Right.
trying to see where we can to make some inroads that way. And then
That's
we've,
awesome.
yeah. And because again, that's the fun. What inspired me was talking to artists again, like what they're facing. And there was a band that had this amazing opportunity to go to Europe for the style of music they did. It would be really impactful for them, but seeing them having to sell like almost all their instruments except the ones they play, their couch, their furniture, like all this stuff, to be able to buy the plane tickets in advance that they needed to get over there before they could make the money.
Right.
And I was like, how many people don't have a couch they can sell to buy that ticket, and then they can't go? Or artists talking about getting opportunities to go to Mexico City or different things like that. And so I think to the general public, everybody's always like, oh, they're so lucky. I'd trade places with them in a second. Look at them getting to travel around and be bohemians and musicians and all that sort of stuff. And
It's
it's
not
like,
all glamour.
particularly like you see them up on stage and the lights are shining down and
Yeah.
they're singing it. People are like, oh man, that's the life.
When
And
you
then,
zoom in, there's a lot of stains
well,
on your
you
shirt.
don't even
There's
need
a,
to zoom
yeah.
in. Just wait 30 minutes till the show's over. Go out back when they're loading their gear into a
Yeah,
20,
sweating.
30-year-old car going back to their studio apartment with no health insurance.
Right.
Yeah, let's see how glamorous it is right now, right? So, um, just, you know, I think in the work we're doing to support artists, and again, we do a lot of free music education programs and things like that too. So we're trying to help people at different levels in their career. But really, these grants are about people that have done a lot of hard work and pushed the boulder halfway up the hill, and hoping that these grants help them is just another set of hands to help them push
Yeah.
a little bit more. And it's exciting to see some of the. And again, don't take credit for people's success in the sense that they've had to done a lot of hard work and the music has to be good and all that stuff. But like I was just in a hotel room the other day and had the TV on. and all of a sudden I hear one of our 2022 grant recipient songs. I'm like, did my phone turn on or something? And I turn around, and Dean Johnson's song is in like a national commercial for Western wear or something like that. I guess apparently played through like the Major League MLB baseball playoffs and stuff like that. And I was like,
That's
wow,
amazing.
that's awesome. Just because I know a sync like that, or for those that don't know, a sync is what it's called when you place your music into a commercial or a movie or a TV show. That's probably a reasonable chunk of change that's allowing him to pay his rent
Right.
for the next couple months, or go on tour, or do any of that stuff. And
What are some other from the past, some significant names that you people have, maybe not necessarily taken their scholarship as a platform, but it's boosted them up and that people may have heard of?
sure. So for example, Deep Sea Diver just got signed to Sub Pop. That I know that they used some of our grant money that they got to make the record that's actually coming out on Sub Pop.
Amazing. They're
Um,
going on tour with Pearl Jam.
they've been on tour with Pearl Jam a
Yeah.
couple times, yeah. Byland, another one of our bands, they've used their money to help go on the road and do stuff like that. They're actually going on tour with Deep Sea Diver, which is cool. Dean Johnson, who I mentioned, I know that he used our grant to help buy a bunch of merch and stuff before his first tour. Because again, like if you're going out and doing 20-day tour, you need to buy enough T-shirts and stuff to sell, because that's how you make your money
Who doesn't
to
want to
pay your
turn
rent.
1,500 into 3,000?
Exactly, but you have to have that $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 to pay for the T-shirts up front, because not everybody's going to be cool enough to front them to you till you
And a
get
lot
rent.
of times that's what keeps you alive on tour.
100%.
And it might be the only money you have when you get home.
That's exactly. And so that there's stuff like that, and then I mean, there's let me see, I could pull. I mean, I could just give you a sense, like Thunder Pussy, we gave him a grant, and
Oh,
I don't
amazing.
know specifically, like I think, but they went out on tour with Alice in Chains, and it's covering expenses for stuff like that. Uh,
Teza Talks
Tezza
was a
Talks is great.
recipient
Yeah,
last
we
year.
helped record their new record, and Tezza just got over. They just had their first million streams on their new record, which is
That's
great.
incredible.
Um, gosh, who else? I'm
I
looking
know
at this.
Jeff Fielder and Tekla
They got a
are.
grant. They're making a record.
Yep,
Shayna Shepherd's done stuff with it. Shayna just is a grant recipient of ours. Just has uh, just played with the reunited, or not reunited, with the remaining members of Soundgarden in something called New Dragons, which
yeah.
was a great opportunity for them. And they've played with Duff from Guns N' Roses and a bunch of people like that. Zan Fiscum, who was on The Voice, is just fantastic. I mean, there's all these. They're all the bands or
Right,
artists that we give stuff, they're all doing stuff pretty much, and they're exciting. Like the Black Ends, who are awesome, or seem kind of like blowing up right now. They're
right.
going to Europe. They're going to like
That's awesome.
Spain. Like, and the awesome thing that I feel right now is, and I don't know how you feel about this, but like when you're in your 20s and you're in bands and there's other bands or whatever. Sometimes you can be like jealous. Why is that band getting that show? Why is this doing that? Why didn't I get, or at least maybe that's just me. But I get such satisfaction and pride about seeing the success of
Sure.
other people. And even today, like I was on Instagram and I saw the Black Ends posted that they just got like Ernie Ball just hooked them up with free strings or something like that. And I was like, I remember what that was like when I got a bunch of free strings from Gibson. And I was like,
Right.
hell yes, this is killer, man. And again, that's $7 a pack that they don't need to
Well,
spend.
it's validating
Mm-hmm.
because there is some entity, even though you shouldn't, you know, it shouldn't be that you require outside validation for whatever you're creating, right? But to a certain degree, you want to be seen. So
Right.
any one of those things feels like a milestone.
No doubt.
For every $7 you don't have to spend, it's $7 you can put in the gas tank.
100%. Or
$7
you can put a burrito.
you can keep the lights on at
Yeah.
home.
If you can find a burrito for $7, that's a burrito you could eat.
When you go on, like the other thing people don't consider, when you go on tour, like when I go on tour for 3 weeks, I don't not pay rent because I'm not at home.
100%. 100%.
So if you're making, $150 because, whatever,
Yeah.
because you're touring somewhere you've never been, that's tough luck. The landlord wants his money.
It totally. Well, the funny thing, when we started Sonic Guild here in Seattle, because it started originally in Austin in 2013, and they, for years, when they down there, they would do a live celebration event like we're doing in February here. But since when we launched, we kind of launched right into the pandemic. We had our official launch event on February 29th, 2020, and the whole world shut down like a week and a half
Right.
later. But we had our first in-person grant celebration last year, which you were at. It was great that you helped us out with it. And to me, when I got this off the ground, it was always about the money, in the sense of like, we got to get money to musicians. And that I always thought that's going to be the thing. But that night, hearing from the musicians, I realized that it was the acknowledgement was almost as important as the money, because you work so hard and you're doing everything. And sometimes you feel like you're screaming into the void. And for those people to get up in front of the community, and I'll maybe tell a little bit about how the grants get decided.
Yeah.
But to have guests stand in front of their community, some of them had their parents there, things like that. And this sense of like, I'm not delusional.
Right.
All this hard work means something, right? And, you know, I'm sure some people would be like, well, you shouldn't care what the outside world says. You should be able to do it. But most people need a little something. They need to think there's some sort of light at the tunnel that's not just a train coming at them.
If people didn't want to be acknowledged in any way, they would sing their songs at home and never try to be on a stage.
Right. Right. Totally. So, but and I think that's cool, because the industry's changed and stuff, and there used to be different ways to get acknowledged, and I'm we're not trying to recreate the past, right? And I'm not saying it was better back then, because there's been exploitation in this space from the minute it's existed.
Sure.
From the minute people started banging on logs, there was probably some exploitation where it was like,
Right.
I'll give you this gig, but you have to give me that buffalo skin first
Sure.
to make sure I cover my expenses on
Right.
the gig, right? So it's tough, but there's a lot of cool stuff about how much agency people have for themselves these days, and that you can make a record on your phone or whatever and get it out into the world, and nobody stands between you and people hearing your music, really.
Except
But
for a couple algorithms.
right, but the challenge, well, theoretically, right? I mean, theoretically anybody could hear it, but the challenge too is that some of the ways that artists made a little bit of money to put fuel in the tank along the way have been removed, right? Like, if people aren't buying physical product, you can't sell 100 CDs at $10 a pop and have $1,000 in your
Right.
pocket or things like that. So how do you find ways to try to get money to people? And again, in the old model, there's always been people that had funds, right? There were all those bands like, how come they're always in the studio, or how come the other thing? And then you
How
find
do
out
they
later,
ha-
like, oh, there was a trust fund working there, or
Right.
there was something in there.
Why do they
So-
have such nice instruments?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. How come they seem to fly everywhere and everybody else seems to drive everywhere? I don't know what's going on with that.
Sure.
But so what appealed to me about Sonic Guild was that the grants that we give out are unrestricted, right? Like I was saying, we're not asking for a percentage of future royalties, and hopefully that levels the playing field a little bit. Now, granted, we are giving grants to a smaller subset of artists. Like, we sometimes people ask, well, why don't you spread it out more evenly? And I sometimes jokingly say, we could buy a cup of coffee for every musician in Seattle, but I don't know if that's really going to move anybody's career
It's not going to
forward.
help. Right.
So, my goal is that we'll grow, and the amount of grants we give will get bigger, the size of them will get bigger. But even if we can't grow much more than this, just to see what somebody getting $10,000 can do is substantial.
And all of the money is sourced from patronage and from charity auction?
Well, no, so it's patronage, it's like foundations, it's private individuals, it's some governmental grants, some sponsorship, like the Tito's Vodka has been a supporter of
Right.
ours. They're an Austin-based company. And, I try to find that balance. I mean, the cool thing is that, and let me tell you about how the grant process works, but in terms of the sponsorship or the donors, they have no say. Like, there's no money that's directed like, I want to give you this money, but you have to give a grant to this kind of music, or you have to give a grant to this artist. They
Right.
understand that that's not how it works. So people are often curious. They're like, well, this sounds great, but who's deciding who gets these grants, right? And so the way that the organization was sourced when they first started it, they came up with the idea is that they thought, we're going to have these patrons that pay this monthly or yearly fee, and then they're going to have a voice in helping to determine who the grant recipients are, with that thought that, like, I don't want to be the one responsible. But the challenge or the which is great, but
Like
also
like Grammy membership.
right. But the one thing that about that is that then there is that layer of like, well, those that have enough disposable income to be members of the organization, that's maybe not skewing that. So what we did at a certain point is that then we're like, okay, then we're going to make sure everybody that's ever received a grant from us on the musician side, they'll all get a vote. And then also we have some people that work in the music business as well as advisors. And people can't vote for stuff if they have a conflict of interest. You can't vote for somebody you manage. But at this point in Seattle, the number of past grant recipients, because you think we've given out 51 grants, and if there's 4+ members per band or whatever like that, that outnumbers the number of the people that are paying the money per year. So it really
Right.
is a community thing. And then we also, so the way it works is that in the beginning of the year, or when we start the award cycle, we make a call for artists. So our members, past grant recipients, and advisors, they can all nominate artists for consideration. But we also open up to the general public, where you can nominate. Like if Mike, you were
When does
saying,
that happen?
that will happen in September. That's usually when that happens. So we got a list of about 300 bands or artists like through that process to begins with, and then we vote on all that, and we narrowed that down to a top 40. And then we do a voting again with all those same groups, and then that determines the final 10.
Are bands notified if they make that top
We
40?
tell them if they make the top 40. Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, it's tough. Like,
What are some of the qualifiers?
well, it's really this grant is really based on music. I mean, it's not for this grant. It's like the MacArthur Genius Awards or things like that. It's like we're nominating people because we think of the quality of your music and
All right.
the impact you're having. Whereas some other grants are more based on specific need or things like that. I mean, our contention really is that most musicians need support one way or another. And
If a band was only a studio band, would they be eligible, or are you looking for bands that are being active
well,
in the community?
we want them to be active, and that's
Sure.
part of the way that people know about you is being active.
Right.
Our only things is we would not give a grant to somebody that's actively signed to a major label at
Sure.
this point. Although that could change at some point because we definitely know artists that are actively signed to a major label that still are scraping by because the money's not there that once was. And then you can only get a grant from us once. But let's say like if you were in a band and then that band breaks up and you form a new band, you could be eligible or something again. But
Yeah.
just that thought of like trying to spread that around. And yeah, and then us finding other sources like the tour support grant, the free education. We're going to do a 9-part series that's going to launch in April or May. I don't know the specifics, but that'll be offered up to not only people in Seattle, but it'll be available to people in around the Austin or Colorado or some other places we are as well, and probably if you're anywhere. But
Wow.
our goal, and we're going to collaborate with the Recording Academy on that, so we're getting a higher quality caliber of stuff, and then we do other sort of education stuff and other opportunities. We did a program with Bloodworks Northwest, which is a nonprofit that basically collects blood for the hospitals around the region. And we worked with them to create a community impact grant last year where artists were voted on. This was then the general public voted on this for artists that were doing good works in their community beyond just the music.
Oh, wow.
And so we gave out 10 $500 micro grants and then 2 $2,500 major grants as part of that. And then we captured content of all those and promoted it. And so like, as an organization, we hope that we can become that place where, if you're a company or Microsoft, whatever it might be, you might be like, hey, I want to support music, but they don't really have a place to do that. Sure, they can hire a band to play at their party or something like that.
And that's nice.
But a lot of these people understand that music's important. It's important to our culture. It's important to it's what makes Seattle an appealing place for people to want to work here and stuff like that. And so I have no problem, in the best of senses, Robin Hooding. If we can get money from one place and get it in musicians' pockets, I'm all for it. So
I'm for that.
many are, and granted, I mean, I understand that there's no process like this is ever going to be 100% perfect. we're iterating as we go. We're really trying to make sure that it's as fair and equitable as possible, and that we're, you know,
You guys ever give any money to a podcast?
well, we haven't yet, but I will say that we had a donor that came in a year and a half ago, and they were inspired by the role producers play in our community. And
Oh, wow.
they said I'd like to. They were inspired by a producer from Austin named George Reef, who had passed away recently. And they were like, same way that what we do for musicians, they were like, I'd like to do that for producers. And so we started this program, the George Reef Producers Grant, where there's money that would go to a producer, and the goal there is that it's to pay that producer to work with an artist that couldn't afford to work with them otherwise.
That's cool.
So for example, the Beautiful Freaks, who are one of our grant recipients this year, they actually benefited because Lily and Blair won this grant and then made the Beautiful Freaks album. They
Wow.
came out with that. And so we're going to get that going again, yeah. And so I don't know the exact figure, but I mean, there'll probably be about, $40,000 or $50,000 in producer grants that'll go out. Yeah. And that
That's
will
amazing.
hopefully continue on as a yearly thing.
For someone listening or
Yes.
watching that wants to get involved, how do they do that? On a big level
Yeah,
or a
yeah,
small
I'll tell you.
level? On
So
every level.
again, we're a new organization. We're figuring different stuff out. So, well, first off, when we talk about membership or being a part of this organization, there's been some confusion sometimes that people think that we're charging musicians to be members of this organization to get grants from us,
Right.
and that is not the case. Our members or our donors, they're music
Patrons.
fans. They're patrons. They're music fans that want to support music. And so to be a member of the organization, it's $750 a year. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so 80% of that's tax deductible. In exchange for that, if you live in Seattle or Austin, you get to come to monthly curated private shows that oftentimes happen at more reasonable hours than maybe going out to a venue. We're not trying to get you to go anywhere at midnight on a Tuesday night to see music,
Sure.
uh, unless that's really what you want. We can make some recommendations, and then so that's one way to get involved. We have just some supporter levels on our website, and then we're working on some other things about just if you just want to know what's going on. I mean, you can always follow our socials, things like that. But the other things is like, do you work for a company? Do you become a member of ours? Does your company have a charitable matching program? Does your company have, want to support the community? Like there's a variety of different ways that we can work with people to work together to support music and, make our community vibrant. Um,
Do you
there's
have to be a patron or a member to attend the event in February,
You do not. You can buy a ticket to come see our event in February. That
which
the
will
Triple
also
Door. It's February
support?
22nd, which supports. Yeah. We have a amazing auction that's going to be coming up in February. It's online. So one of the benefits of working in music in this town for as long as I have, and some of our biggest artists, they very much know how many things had to go right in their
Of
careers
course.
to get where they are. And so we have items from like signed guitars from like Dave Matthews and Mike McCready, Kirk from Metallica, The Head and the Heart. We've got amazing. We've got a Electro Harmonics Big Muff pedal, all signed by Mudhoney and played through by
That's awesome.
Mudhoney, and stuff like Pearl Jam's giving us signed posters, and they made 11 vinyl variants of their last album, and they're giving us a set of all 11 that we can auction off as a set.
That's cool.
Amazing photographs of Pearl Jam as well from Lance Mercer, Nirvana photos from Charles Peterson, just a whole bunch of stuff like that. And the really cool thing is that one of our donors said they're going to step up and they will match any purchase in this auction dollar for dollar up to $25,000.
So if the McCready guitar goes for
They'll write
$25,000,
us a check for $25,000.
that's incredible.
But the collective, they won't do that for every item, but
Right.
for everything adding up. So if you want an amazing Mike McCready signature model guitar and you want to play it or you want to hang it on your wall, and your friends come over and you're sitting around drinking bourbon looking at it, and you can be like, you see that guitar right there? I paid 25 for it, but let me tell you, I put 50 in Sonic Guild's pocket by doing it. So I'm excited about that, and really just seeing. You'd think we'd run out of good bands at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. Like I'm
Mm-mm.
just blown away every year, and then just how they continue to get better. And there's something, if you've been in music or you've been around music, there's something that's so addictive about seeing a band right as they're taking off.
It was really inspiring to be at the show last year.
Uh-huh.
Really inspiring.
Yeah. Because you don't always see someone like, and I don't want to say the best of the best because there's so much good music out there.
Yes.
But to say like these are 10 really great artists, see them all there and be like, wow, look at the diversity of this music.
It's pretty
All
awesome.
different. It's not like, I jokingly, when we were starting this, I was talking to Jonathan, who started Sub Pop. And I was like, hey, man, we're not trying to create the white guy guitar preservation society. We're not trying to keep grunge
Right.
going. You know, it's the people on the stage hopefully look like the people in our community. We're not trying to decide what music is getting championed. We're just trying to build a magnifying glass to champion it.
For music.
For music, yeah. And you just never know where the killer shit's going to come from. And nothing's better, too, than for people in the crowd where they're like, see a Teza Talks or they see a Byland or something. They're like, what the fuck was that?
Right.
That was killer. And that's how fans for life get made, right? And so
That's right.
And that, you know, there's certain luxuries that we have because having worked in the space for a long time here and things like that, but there's more opportunities all the time to find ways to support musicians. Like, for example, this summer, for the second year, we're collaborating with the Seattle Art Museum and doing a free 5-part concert series in the Sculpture Park for the community, where we'll highlight a bunch of our artists.
Amazing.
It's a great way because we get to pay the musicians pretty well to play. It's free to the community, so they can come out.
Are they recipients or are they?
It's a combination of both. You know,
Oh.
some of it's like based on what the art museum is as well, because they, you know, they've kind of have an art lens on what they're doing. But
Sure.
like this last year when we were working with them, they were like, we could take about anybody, but we have to have Terror Cactus. They were like Terror Cactus, like they just wanted him, and they played and they were amazing.
And what kind of music is that?
It's electronic, but sort of has this kind of world music thing as well. Yeah. They're one of our grant recipients. Yeah, they're one of our grant recipients. Their
It's
record,
not a grindcore band.
No, their record is amazing. I would tell you to go check it out. Just all that stuff. And so wherever we can be a catalyst to create opportunities for musicians to get paid, we are going to take that and try to provide that, and hopefully it'll just keep growing.
Bless you.
Feels good to give, my friend.
Can you imagine if an organization was around like this when you were 20? What kind of change that could have, what kind of impact that would have had?
Well, I almost feel like it was in a weird sort of way. Granted, it was things, but
major labels. Well, they were throwing money around all left and right.
But more there used to be when you could actually make a little bit of money selling physical records. There were a lot of like bedroom labels. There was always seemed, at least in Seattle, there always seemed to be like some guy or some gal that was like, I got this job and I'll give you $1,000 to put out to pay for you to press your 7-inch or something, you know, or things like that. Again, just like not everybody has a credit card that they can put debt on to try to build something. And, you know, when I moved to Seattle, my first apartment, I lived in with some other people to begin with, but my first solo apartment on Capitol Hill was under $200 a month.
Yeah.
And I was making pizza for a living, paying my rent, and having enough money to like help pay for a practice space and things like that you needed.
Can't do that anymore.
No.
Yeah, you also didn't have, you didn't have a cell phone.
I didn't have a car. I mean, there was a lot of stuff I didn't have. And, you know, and that I think that, you know, musicians have to decide what level of sacrifice they're willing to do, right? If you're really pursuing a music career and you don't want to work a job, you can't necessarily have this middle-class life that your friends and family may be having, right? So maybe you're living in a group house with 6 other people, or you're, you know, this, that, or the other thing. Sure. But even with that being said, if you're willing to make those sacrifices, even with those sacrifices, are you able to like do what you need to do to try to make something happen?
I mean, you're singing to the choir right now. After 30 plus years of being here and being at it, somehow miraculously, I make it.
Yeah, and in no way
and I every single month I feel fortunate.
And in no way am I trying to. I don't want this to come off as a curse towards you or anything like that. But when you're working as a professional musician, there's all different levels of that. It's amazing how many things need to go right to counterbalance one thing that can go wrong. A car breaking down, a tooth needing to be
A gig being
extracted.
canceled.
Yeah, a gig being canceled.
Anything.
The pandemic, like any number of things like that. Like, how do you save for a rainy day for something like that when you
Have to
can
buy new tires for you. I just bought tires
exactly
for my truck, and I was like,
or taking it back? Even
"Are you kidding me?"
buying strings, where you're like, oh shit, that gig got canceled. We're going to the studio. I really need to put new strings on my guitar so it sounds good. But
I have friends at Labella.
there you go. There you go. Yeah. Hey, all music manufacturers that watch Mike's podcast, you should donate gear to all the artists in our thing.
Maybe, let me see. I know a lot of people. Let's see if I can.
Well, again, or for our auction every year, we can find a way to collaborate because I don't know. I'm a dreamer at heart, right? And people have to have dreams. But if the dreams start feeling like they're unattainable completely,
They're
then,
fantasies.
then well, but people stop dreaming. If you don't think you can get somewhere with a guitar, do you stop buying guitars? I mean, like things. So it's what I'm just saying is like it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
If this level of the ecosystem of music is active and making stuff happen, and it's inspirational to a lot of people. I mean, I often say like one of the biggest successes in Seattle in the last bunch of years has been Brandy Carlisle, and Brandy started out. I mean, back when I worked at EMP, somebody that worked with me used to book her to play in the Liquid Lounge, which was the bar in the museum.
Yeah.
Or she did open mics, or did play, or maybe not open mics, but played up at the Paragon up on the top of Queen Anne. Like basically, I think kind of I didn't see her there, but like in the back of the room while people were eating dinner or whatever. So people are always like, "Oh, it's amazing, Brandy. She worked really hard." But an artist like Brandy had to come out of a group of probably like 200 peer musicians that they were playing shows with and doing this, and you get inspired by the person that opens up for you or who you're opening for, or you get an advice on a gig that's happening that you didn't know about, any of that sort of stuff. So very few make it to the mountaintop like Brandy has. And maybe you talk to Brandy and she would even say, I'm not at the mountaintop, because there's still places she wants to go. But that doesn't happen if there's no community to be a part of when you're brewing the coffee, right? And that's why, like, to me, we're just one part of this bigger community. What we're doing is one thing, equally important, like an open mic's equally as important.
Sure.
We're the on-ramps, that's the work that we've done in the community to support youth engagement, like the Vera Project, or, I started this program when I worked at EMP called Sound Off that's been going for 25 years now, that like a lot of young people, they're like, when they're forming bands, they're like, our goal is just to get into Sound Off. And that gives people a goal. Like, so having a goal can be good sometimes. And so how can we all, there'll always be a level of competition in commercial art or music or whatever. But at the same time, how do we create an environment that we can all kind of compete and all kind of win at some level or another as well? Different levels,
Sure.
Just
what would you say to an artist who applies and isn't accepted or doesn't win?
Okay, so just first
because
off,
I imagine
because you don't apply for the grants with these grants, you get nominated.
Oh, it's all nominations.
It's all not now the tour support grant you apply for.
Yeah, okay.
And other stuff like that. Just to think that. But what I would say is that and we have a couple of advisors and stuff that have talked to bands and they've been disappointed, and they've said, and I would say too, that like if you look at it, some people maybe got nominated the first year and they didn't make it, but maybe they got it the second year,
right,
and the third year, or and sometimes depending on who the artist is or whatever, maybe be like, maybe what you're doing isn't resonating with people, which is always a tough thing, because the arts is one of the few things where you can do everything right and still fail.
Absolutely.
If people don't,
how many demo tapes did you make back in the day before you got a gig? Like,
I think many of those demo tapes were released as records and they're hard to listen for me to listen to now. But yeah, I mean, that's the tough thing, is that no amount of money can make people like something if they don't like it.
Right.
The industry has tried for years. You've seen these things where they spent every cent they had thinking they were going to sing, and then all of a sudden
peg through a round
hole.
Yeah.
And so, and to this day, this is the beauty of music too, is that it's like a mystery. Why can you have 10 artists that kind of sound the same, kind of look the same, kind of dress the same, all the thing, but one of them, the light just seems to be shining down from the heavens on, and we used to talk about authenticity with artists all the time. I think it's much more about believability. Why do you believe one artist when they get up and sing some song,
Right.
and the other ones you're kind of like, yeah, it just didn't
I
really
don't
do
know.
it for me. So it's hard to maybe be introspective as an artist and like look at yourself and do that.
Sure.
But sometimes you're not doing anything wrong. Maybe time just hasn't caught up with what you're doing yet, or it's too derivative of something else that's already happening. Like you could be an amazing Oasis band. You could be an amazing, shoegaze band, but if there's already a really popular shoegaze band, that slot's taken kind of in people's consciousness. So, um,
But it shouldn't be taken as discouraging.
look, I can tell you 100% I'm tall, but I was never going to be in the NBA.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I couldn't enjoy a pickup game of basketball every now and then.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, it's like any career thing. Like, if you don't love playing music, there are a lot easier ways to make a living than
And
this.
how?
It's like that old adage, like dad, you know, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I was like, as a kid, and then I was like, yeah, it's kind of true. That it's like that sense.
Kinda,
But I
but
just mean that
let me
sense,
tell
like,
you what.
but I've done a shit ton of work in music in my life, not getting paid for it
Right. Yeah.
because
Of
I loved it.
course. Yeah.
And to this day, I'm not a real religious person, but I've come as close to that ever being in a room with 100 other people, seeing some amazing band melt my face
Absolutely.
off, where I feel humanity on all its different levels. And that could be love, that could be hate, that could be anything. It just like, but it amazes me. I mean, this really is like as close to religion as I get. It amazes me that you and I could walk into this room and write some song in the next 10 minutes that will somehow make people feel something, move the molecules around in their body and change their life. I'm not saying that we're capable of that, but it could
It's
happen.
possible.
It's possible. Anything's possible. That's why I play the lottery every now
We've
and then.
never
It could
tried.
win.
Yeah, right.
But where else can you do that? Like, I mean, maybe there's other fields. I mean, I guess for a writer, I mean, if any of that kind of creative stuff,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm sure that if you're the person that invented Instagram, you must take a lot of feel really good because like so many people interact with it. Just like I mean that's
Yeah.
maybe pushing it, yeah, but I just mean there's a lot of things we do as a human beings, but music is crazy, right? That like if you love a song when you're 12, you'll probably love it when you're 72,
For
and
sure.
it'll take you back. It's a time machine. It'll take you back to the first time you heard it. Um, or it'll remind you of this, or any number of things, or it'll push you forward. Like think about people listening to David Bowie in the late 60s, early 70s, and how many people were thinking about fucking outer space and
Right.
just things like that they might not have thought about anyway, or any of that
Oh,
like
that was definitely on people's minds then.
I know,
Yeah.
but I just mean that sense of like exploration,
Right.
or anything's, or how many times, and maybe it's generational. Maybe people feel about gaming this way, or they feel about other things. But to
Right.
me, it's nobody can walk in a room and program a game that's going to do this in 10 minutes for somebody the way.
That's true. Where do you see the future of Sonic Guild, other
Well,
than just growing in the number of grants and the size of grants?
Well, our organizationally, the larger ambition, and we've had some starts and stops there, is that it started in Austin. We came here to Seattle. We've gotten that off the ground and it's grown every year here. We've tried to launch in Colorado. We were there for about 2 years. We haven't had the success we've wanted there yet. And so we're kind of pausing right there. And we're going to offer some stuff to them this year. And we did a pilot program in Bentonville in Arkansas. But our goal long term is to try and be more cities where we can be helping musicians, because the problems are the same everywhere, really.
Sure.
I mean, sure, Seattle's a little more expensive, or San Francisco's a little more expensive, but musicians are facing a lot of these challenges everywhere. And then I think if we could get enough cities, then you're working at a scale where you potentially could then start having some impact on people trying to tour and things like that, and building a network.
Right.
And then also it opens you up to fundraise at a larger level
some of these bands can actually do show exchanges. That
Exactly.
creates a tour circuit.
I mean, one of my goals, and I don't know if we will get there, but an earlier version of that is that, I mean, you've been in bands forever. So much of it is just people knowing each other.
Yeah.
And even with the internet, just that's tough. So I would love it if in the cities that we had, if we were able to bring our grant classes together from the different parts of the country for like a 3 or 4 day intensive where they could meet each other, perform, maybe have some public facing performances,
Right.
but really create that thing where once people know each other, it's easy to call, pick up the phone and be like, hey, you should come out to Seattle. You should play. We're going to set up this show. You're going to, and
Yeah, that's awesome.
that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to, as I think about what we can do, I'm trying to do it in a way where we're not doing it for people. We're trying to create a mechanism where we're giving them better tools to do it themselves.
Sure.
Right? Like, just like we're not saying like, we're giving you this money and you have to spend it with this producer at this studio.
Teach a person to fish.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And that it may change too, but the more people know each other and the more people that like each other, like, I mean, I've seen some of our Austin Sonic Guild grant recipients have like come up to Seattle and played the Freak Out Festival and stuff like that. And, people need a reason. People need anchor dates. People need reasons to go different places. And then we can be an advocate. Like, we're a nonprofit, so we can't be like a full-on advocacy organization. It can't be our thing. But like, there's things that have happened in the industry. Like, it used to be the best way that an artist could build a career was stealing audience by opening up for bigger bands when they came to town. And it's really hard. Because artists tour so much now, they either carry support with them because they're getting incentivized by other places, or they're like, we're on the road an extra 70 days a year. We don't want to strike our equipment on the stage so some local band can put their shit up there and
Sure.
play, right? But the trickle down at a certain point is that, like, if you're not developing the emerging artists, then, who's going to fill the venues when the nationals aren't coming, and like all that sort of stuff. And so new problems require new solutions, and hopefully Sonic Guild can be part of one of those solutions.
Well, I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you.
I'm excited for the show in February.
Yeah. I, and I'd say to, like, because I know you have people that listen to this, and thank you if you're still listening and this far in, is that, Sonic Guild's here, it's in Austin, there's stuff like that, but you can support people in your community. Go to a show.
Right.
If you go to a show, if you have the money in your pocket, buy a t-shirt, buy a record. Like, that's going to help that band get to the next city, or like make art or anything like that. And that it's really small stuff. Like, and again, like, every time you buy a t-shirt or you buy a ticket, that tells a musician that they're doing something right.
Do you know I have a giant dresser, 2 drawers full of card catalog folded band shirts that I've bought from bands on tour.
Are any of them not black shirts?
My Teza shirt is white.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, it's also a little tight on me right now.
There you go. That's a different podcast. But yeah, I mean, again, it's the small stuff, right? And it's nobody walks down the aisle to a movie, or nobody walks down the aisle to a book.
Right.
Music plays these roles in our lives, and there's a lot of music out there, no doubt, but we always need more.
What a perfect way to wrap up.
I know. I'm a pro, man.
You are a pro.
I know. I'm sorry. You only got to ask like 2 questions, and I'm just like blah 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 blah.
That's a perfect guest. Ben, thank you.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you do for the community. You're awesome, giving back, and that creating this platform for people as well. It's like,
this is awesome space to have. I'm fortunate to have it, and I hope I can get some 2025 recipients in here.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, I know you're going to loan this to the presidents of the USA. Are you going to get them to sit for a Couch Riffs
I've had
session?
every one of them on.
Oh, have you at this point? Okay.
I've had all 4 members.
Right.
And Muzz, who was played a gig. And I had Sir Mix-a-Lot, which includes the subset factor.
But I guess have you ever had the 3 core guys together, because they play off each other?
I don't do that. I did that with the Fastbacks. I had the whole band, and it doesn't work for my format.
Well, you know what I found
Tell me.
is that if you put bands together, they can't talk about each other when they're all there together. So
What fun is that?
exactly. Exactly. All right, my friend. Thank you.